Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight is about the Biden-Putin summit in Geneva, Switzerland. US and Russian ambassadors will return to their diplomatic posts. Both countries will begin consultations on cybersecurity. These are some of the known outcomes of the summit between the US President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin Wednesday in Geneva. Earlier this year, Russia recalled its ambassador from the United States after President Biden called Putin a killer. In April this year, Russia asked the American ambassador to go home as well. Both leaders spoke separately after the summit instead of at a joint press conference. As a head of a state custom, Biden gave Putin a crystal bison statue and a pair of aviator sunglasses. A scuffle broke out amongst US and Russian journalists outside the summit location, resulting in most of the media being shut out of the summit. The Biden administration has released its first national strategy for countering domestic terrorism. The move comes 5 months after a violent mob of supporters of former President Donald Trump stormed the US Capitol in Washington, D.C. Released by the National Security Council, the framework describes the threat as more serious than potential attacks from overseas. However, it also emphasizes the need to protect civil liberties. The strategy is worded to state that domestic terrorism must be tackled in an ideologically neutral manner. Last year, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security named white supremacist group as the single most dangerous domestic extremist threat to the nation. This was in the first ever Homeland Threat Assessment, which was released last October. American Muslim Lina Khan is sworn in as the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. Lina Khan was confirmed by the U.S. Senate on Tuesday as commissioner and within hours appointed as chair of the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. She's an antitrust expert and the youngest FTC commissioner ever appointed. The 32-year-old Pakistani-American Muslim is an associate professor of law at Columbia Law School. Khan advised the U.S. House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee in its investigation into Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. With her help, the committee published a report last fall that laid out how these companies use and allegedly abuse their market power to benefit themselves. Her appointment comes at a time when the federal government is increasing its oversight of big tech. Hundreds of Israelis marched through occupied East Jerusalem on Tuesday. Chanting slogans like "Death to Arabs," they celebrated the Israeli occupation of Eastern Jerusalem. Israel's annexation is not recognized by most of the international community. At least 17 Palestinians were arrested from their own neighborhoods to clear the way for the Israeli march. In related news, the new Israeli government, within 2 days of taking charge, bombed occupied Gaza. The new government is headed by the ultra-right-wing Naftali Bennett as prime minister. Israel claims the airstrikes were ordered because of incendiary balloons that came from Gaza. There were no reports of casualties on either side. The United States Senate has unanimously approved a bill to make Juneteenth a public holiday. Juneteenth marks the end of slavery in the United States. It is celebrated on June 19th. It began in 1865 when enslaved people in Texas learned that they had been freed under the Emancipation Proclamation, 3 months after the fact. Lawmakers say establishing Juneteenth as a holiday comes at a time when the national conversation about race and racism is tense. A 15-year-old Muslim girl and her mother were the victims of a hate crime in the Canadian city of Calgary. Traveling on the train, the girl was wearing a hoodie with the outline of Palestine in a keffiyeh print. A woman approached them and started to verbally attack her. She then pushed the girl, and in self-defense, the girl punched the woman to escape further abuse. The incident follows the terror attack on a Muslim family in London, Ontario, over a week ago. A white man initially attacked the Afzal family, killing 4 of the 5 family members. Dr. Mukarram Zaidi is with Canadian Muslim research think tank. He says these kinds of hate crimes are a growing trend that follow protests against violence in the Middle East. He said that the media needs to provide more nuanced coverage of the conflict in the Middle East so that people in the West gain a better understanding. Pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca is facing a setback in its efforts to find an alternative to vaccines. A late-stage trial failed to provide evidence that its COVID-19 antibody therapy protected people who had contact with an infected person. The study tried to determine if the therapy could prevent adults who had been exposed to the virus in the past 8 days from developing COVID-19 symptoms. It was only 33% effective as compared with a placebo, which is not considered statistically significant to determine success. An online Christian fundraising site is under fire for funding white supremacist groups. Give, Send, Go calls itself the leader in Christian fundraising. It first gained notoriety last year after raising more than $500,000 for Kyle Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse murdered 2 Black Lives Matter protesters last August in Kenosha, Wisconsin. US-based Christian group Faithful America has launched a petition against the platform. It's calling on the Southern Baptist Convention and its national leadership to publicly denounce Give, Send, Go. It's also asking them to urge member churches, schools, and nonprofits to cut all ties with them. Faithful America said that there's nothing Christ-like about Give, Send, Go. It said the platform has become the go-to crowdfunding source for white nationalists, even helping fund the January 6th attacks on the U.S. Capitol in Jesus' name. The organization also called out the website for ongoing fundraisers for the anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, Trump's big lie against democracy, and opposition to Black Lives Matter. They said all of these are an affront to the gospel. In Science News today, a project in Nigeria has found a twofold solution to tackle plastic pollution and housing. Discarded plastic bottles are filled with sand, stacked and glued together to form the walls of a house. The material is durable enough to withstand bullets and is also earthquake resistant. In addition, the cost is about 33% less than traditional homes. Engineer Yahya Ahmed was so inspired by a similar project in South America that he decided to start it in Nigeria's central state of Kaduna as well. He explained this had an added benefit of creating jobs for unemployed youth. After completing this current project of 25 homes, his company, Development Association of Renewable Energies, plans to approach the Nigerian government. They're hoping to get funding to expand the enterprise. The German Development Ministry provided the initial financial support for the project. Hate crimes are escalating in Canada. Muslims and other minorities are concerned. Let's hear from Ali Khalaf and Saliha Farouk.
Muslims in London, Canada are afraid to go out of their homes. Islamophobia is rising and they feel not much is being done. However, there seems to be more conversation about concrete actions. Canada, unlike the United States, has laws to deal with hate speech. How those laws can challenge Islamophobia? One must recognize that there is Islamophobia.
Islamophobia is real. Hatred has consequences, and it must stop.
This may be a reference to the fact that in 2017, Canadian Parliament had faced opposition to recognize Islamophobia. That urgency is also reflected in our conversation with the Minister of Transport, Omar Al-Ghabra.
A parliamentary committee did a study on causes of Islamophobia and how to tackle Islamophobia, and it offered recommendations, and we've been working on those recommendations. So some of the measures that our government had taken, we have banned far-right white supremacy groups as terrorist organizations. We've increased funding for mosques and community organizations to enhance their security.
Muslims, by and large, are skeptical of the government but are welcoming the announced summit to take action on Islamophobia.
Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Kashmiri journalist Raqib Hamid Naik has faced death threats after his investigative report on COVID-19 relief funding to American Hindu organizations. Naik unearthed the details of their ties to Hindu supremacist groups in India. Raqib Hamid Naik is joining Saleha Farouk for a detailed conversation.
Thank you. Today we're speaking with journalist Raqib Hamid Naik. Today, thank you so much for being here with us to start the program.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Now, your recent report published on Al Jazeera, one which gained a lot of traction for you, focused on the misuse of United States federal aid for COVID-19. From your research and your writing, how are American Hindu associations in America misusing these federal funds?
So, first of all, let's not call them Hindu. They are Hindutva organizations, and Hinduism and Hindutva are two different things. So, I did this piece in April that explored that revealed how these 5 groups received COVID-19 funding from the U.S. federal government. And first of all, my piece explicitly talks about that these groups have received funds who have links with the Hindu supremacist and right-wing groups in India. So, my piece doesn't talk about whether these funds were misused or not, but some of the groups mentioned in the piece have in the past misused funds and used money, not even the federal one, the other ones that they raise here in the US to push and promote the ideology of Hindutva in India.
Now, a lot of people might be wondering how such Indian American organizations, such as the Hindu American Foundation, which is the name of the organization, how do they become clear to receive federal funding despite these ties that they have to these hate groups that originate in India?
So, right now, my piece, as I said earlier, talks about different organizations, and Hindu American Foundation is one among them because the members, the person who founded that organization was once a VHPA, Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, America's activist. He was on their governing council, and Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America drives its inspiration from Vishwa Hindu Parishad of India, and that is a designated religious militant group. And also its current board members, they fund different RSS affiliates in the United States that include Seva International, Kram Shakti Peeth, Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation, and others. So, the Hindu American Foundation, they received like a lion's share of federal COVID aid funds, And especially with Special Business Administration that gives out these funds, they don't have any set procedure of like, who receives this fund. The only criteria is that it should be a registered organization, and if they have proper documentation in place, they are good to go and receive these funds. And especially when the pandemic was in full swing, so all these organizations were like, not able to pay their employees. So at that time, SBA, responded like, because it was a bad situation for different organizations, and it was meant for those organizations who are not able to pay their employees. But all these different groups, including the Hindu right-wing groups and others, they used this moment to like, take benefit of those funds, and like, they applied and got all these funds. So I mean, there was no such process in place to like vet these organizations before they could receive these funds.
Thank you for that. Now, building upon your piece that was recently published in Al Jazeera, there has been a huge proliferation of Hindutva ideology, as you mentioned, both in the United States as well as in Canada and across North America, really, within, for example, in political groups, as well as in associations and educational institutes in North America as well. In your perspective, from the piece that you published and from the amount of research that you have done on Hindutva ideology, what do you think that the public needs to know about such North American organizations and their ties to Hindutva supremacist and hate groups that originate back in India?
See, we need to understand that these groups are very dangerous for the democracy. I would just talk about the Canadian example. I was going through the Twitter feed of Canadian Hindu Advocacy. It's a group run by Roy Banerjee. He's a Islamophobe, #1 Islamophobe in Canada, and gives a lot of anti-Muslim and Islamophobic speeches. A few days ago, they issued a statement on Twitter calling for a rally in favor of the accused who killed the four Muslims in Canada, in Ontario. So this is the kind of, and this is the very same thing that they do in India, where they take rallies in the favor of people who are accused of lynching Muslims. So in a sense that they are doing the very same thing that they were doing in India, and now they are using the same modus operandi abroad as well. And in my case too, the story after it was published, they have filed a lawsuit. They sent a defamation demand letter, cease and desist notice to me and other activists as well. So I mean, the things that they do in India, they are very much transporting the very same things abroad as well, and implementing their agenda worldwide. And it's not just like, limited to India, as I said earlier. You will see Hindutva and the very parallel organizations that are existing in India, like RSS. You will see HSS in the US, in Canada, in Germany, Australia, all across the Europe. You will see Vishwa Hindu Parishad in America, at the same time in different countries. So they have this parallel Hindutva apparatus and ecosystem everywhere in the world, in most of the countries. So people should be, I mean, everyone, and the government especially, should be very concerned about this rise of Hindu right across the world.
Now, you mentioned a few times during the interview about the government not realizing who they're giving funds to, and just now the government having to be careful. I think that links to a question that a lot of people have on their minds. What kinds of perhaps checks and balances or investigative measures on the part of the government and authorities in North America are needed to be implemented, in your view, in order to perhaps capture Hindutva ideology before it keeps proliferating in certain regions in North America?
Yeah, first of all, we need to, everyone in the government needs to realize the danger posed by the ideology of Hindutva to the ideals and values of democracy. And we see very much in India right now how dangerous it can be for a democracy. Right now in India, all the ideology has dismantled all the democratic institutions, from legislative, executive to judiciary to the press. And worldwide right now, you will see, like we saw in America, we're currently seeing in the Canada. They are wild people. They are dangerous people who endorse this ideology of hate. So the government really needs to understand that this is a hateful ideology, and this is going to have real world implications, especially for minorities, for Muslims. And I think government should immediately, like, especially in the United States, I would say, because I'm currently based here, the government should launch an investigation and look into the financial aspects of all these organizations that are giving funds to Hindu right wing in India, different organizations that are affiliates of right wing in India, and immediately ban them and put a blanket ban on these organizations, because they are very, very dangerous organizations.
Thank you for those insights and recommendations. You previously mentioned the lawsuit that you're facing currently. Of course, let's get into that a little bit more. You are named as a non-party in the lawsuit, and the Hindu American Foundation is the one that filed this lawsuit over the Al Jazeera article that was recently published by yourself. Now, when it comes to this lawsuit, tell us a little bit more about what you might be going through, and at the same time, what do you foresee in the trajectory of this lawsuit? And whatever its outcome might be, how does this lawsuit set a precedent or an example for those working to spread Hindutva influence in North America?
So this lawsuit was filed last month, in the first week of May, and they have named me as a non-party, but the real intent is to chill the free speech and the freedom of press, for sure. So after, I wasn't honestly expecting them to go this far to silence me, but I am a Kashmiri Muslim and a journalist, so it's easier for the right to silence Kashmiris, and especially if you're a Muslim, and give you names and come up with a script that paints you very bad. So that's what they did, and especially personally, it has been a very tough time for me, especially for my mental health too. And considering the fact I moved to the US recently in March, I started working in March when I got my visa, and this was my first story, and I didn't expect this fallback and pushback from these groups. But one thing I have realized, wherever you go, you're not safe from the Hindu right wing. If it was in India, Bajrang Dal, these right-wing groups would have sent goons to my house to beat me, to kill me. If it was left to police, they would have arrested me and put me in jail. But I'm in the US, and they have taken the legal route. They are misusing the legal route by filing this slap lawsuit. So, the idea is to silence and make an example out of me and other activists who have been named in the lawsuit, that whoever goes after the Hindu right wing, they are going to come hard after you. They're going to put you in expensive and lengthy legal cases where you're going to run out of your money and time, and ultimately apologize and never criticize Hindutva, the ideology of Hindutva, the Hindu right in the United States.
And just to conclude, are there any current modes of support that the public or anybody can lend to you during the course of this lawsuit that you would like to share with us today?
Right now, as I am a non-party to the lawsuit, so I do have legal representation, and I anticipate, escalation, and probably they will add me as a defendant, but I'm all ready, because my piece is based on facts, and I have my news organization, the news organization who I wrote it for, Al Jazeera, on my side. They issued a statement a few days ago condemning the lawsuit, this legal harassment and other forms of harassments going around right now. So I have all this kind of support right now, but I would really appreciate people to go and read my, right now I don't need any kind of help, but I would appreciate if people can just read that piece and at least start a conversation within their communities, and ultimately push for a change, push their local lawmakers to look into these organizations and ensure that US, the taxpayer money, or any form of like dollar from the United States shouldn't go for spreading anti-minority hate in India.
We're speaking today with Raqib Hamid Naik, who is a journalist as well as a writer. Raqib, thank you so much for your courage and for your time to speak with us today. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Back to Hena Zuberi in the news studio.
Thank you, Saleha and Raqib, for your tenacity. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. On our show last night, we discussed the recent survey which showed a net drop of 12% in the favorability of the Labour Party amongst Muslims in the United Kingdom. This drop can also be linked to Labour Party head Keir Starmer's handling of Islamophobia within the party. For more, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Muslims in the United Kingdom are more than 5% of the population. They are concentrated in many urban areas, have good influence on politics, and they have been mostly supporters of the Labour Party. But Labour Party is losing their support. Why? And where else will they be going? Is Conservative Party any welcoming party? To discuss that with us is Dr. Muhammad Abdul Bari. Welcome to Muslim Network, Abdul Bari.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid.
Dr. Abdul Bari is a noted civic leader in the United Kingdom, an author and a consultant on parenting issues, and has led the formative years of the Muslim Council of Britain. Why Labour Party is losing its Muslims?
Okay, it's a trend for some time. It has been a trend for some time, especially after this 7/7 incidents. Muslims, at that time, it was Blair government, then came the Labour Party, and also Gordon Brown, who, in my opinion, was relatively better in the sense of the community aspect. And suddenly, overnight, after 7/7, Muslims became the suspect community. I wrote a few articles on that, and that was discussed at that time. Because of the 7/7, there was a suspicion developing. And since then, there is an agenda, a government agenda called Prevent Agenda. And that has been a thorn between the government at the time and the Muslim community, because the Muslims were seen through the prism of security. And when the Tory-led government, and then the Tory government came, they not only maintained the prevent agenda but enhanced its performance, and Muslims were more seen to be through the prism of suspicion. Now, what's happening over the years, individually, some Muslim of Pakistani origin, Bangladeshi origin, different origins were doing quite good. London is led by a Pakistani origin Muslim. He is a London mayor. And fortunately, there is another senior Muslim politician in Scotland. He is the first Muslim leader of the main political party. He is the Labour Party Scotland head. Now, over these years, this prevent agenda and the right-wing newspapers, especially tablet newspapers, they were trying to just put any Muslim event negatively. Gradually, it is piling up. The pressure on the Muslim community and the narrative surrounding the Muslim community was becoming toxic. And Muslims totally disagreed with David Blair's invasion of Iraq in 2003. So since then, things, as I mentioned, through the 7/7 period and all sorts of in the last decade, things have worsened. Now, recently, Conservative Party has been accused by Muslims and many civil society organizations, human rights organizations, to be more or less not only not supporting Muslims, but was seen to be Islamophobic, and so that was one issue. When it came to Labour Party, which was the natural home for many Muslims, and the new leadership somehow, in my opinion, I'm not a politician, but I observe politics. The new leader, I know him personally. He was a renowned lawyer in this country. When he became the leader of the Labour Party, somehow he appears to be following sort of a Blairite approach in terms of party leadership. And Labour was heavily criticized for anti-Semitism, but Islamophobia remained a blind spot. People, especially the media, don't want to see that Islamophobia is an issue. So things have come to surface when many Muslims now think that if Labour Party, their normal home, I'm not saying that all Muslims are with Labour. There are Lib Dems, there are Tory Muslims as well, but overwhelming Muslims were more or less with the Labour Party, and they are now saying, many constituency and many local leaders, councillors, and mostly are from the Labour Party, they are saying that enough is enough. Our votes should not be taken for granted. So that's the situation now.
So where are they going to go? Because if Conservative Party is already considered, Tories are already considered to be Islamophobic, and you're seeing Labour Party is not welcoming. So what has been different experimentation between in a two-party system?
Well, the two-party system has not worked well for some time, probably like in the US, and unfortunately, Lib Dem, which was more or less liberal organization, they collapsed after the failure to win seats from the coalition government. And the Green Party is very small, and Muslims have some positions in the SNP or Scottish Labour Party, but English Labour Party and even in the Welsh Labour Party, but English Labour Party and English Conservative Party seem to be following a path of, I would say, Tory Party is following the right-wing path, and Labour Party is just positioning itself. Nobody knows what exactly it wants to offer. After more than a year of leadership, Keir Starmer is not known what he stands for, and that's another problem. So, but the problem is, although there are individuals who are in the senior position, that's the big issue, and that will be discussed. That needs to be discussed. That mainstream politics is important for any community, minority community, and Muslims are in difficult situation at this moment in terms of party affiliation.
So why Muslims chose Labour Party or Conservative to begin with? Muslims normally, in terms of their worldview, are considered conservative by and large.
I think it's historical. It started with the independence movements of Muslim countries when they were when they were given independence, and Conservative Party, when they were in power, especially Churchill, he was not in favor of giving independence to, say, South Asian Muslims, South Asia, now Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, whatever it is. And it was the Labour Party who took the initiative after the Second World War, and that independence of Pakistan, Bangladesh, India was given during the time of the Labour Party. So naturally, minority people from the different communities, those who were colonies, previous colonies, they have had a positive sympathy for the Labour Party, and also Labour's socially progressive agenda in many areas. That was useful because Muslims are overwhelmingly, generally, from the poverty rank, and Tory Party is seen to be belonging to the rich people. Muslims are not that rich, although there are individuals who are rich and they give donation to probably the Tory Party. So it was a national home for that. On the other hand, many Muslims joined Tory Party because that was a conservative. Conservative means conservatism is an aspect of social conservatism. Muslims are generally conservative. So in the Muslim Council of Britain, we never differentiated between political parties because we didn't subscribe to any political party. We had to be non-partisan. But when it comes to ordinary Muslims, it was the bread and butter. It was this social equality and all sorts of things that matter. That's why they naturally supported the Labour Party. They have been supporting.
So tell us, if Labour Party, they have been supportive, and Labour Party have done few things for the Muslim community. I mean, the change in their laws 3 times to accommodate Islamic financing and Islamic banking. I don't know if any other country in the West has done something like that. Definitely not the United States. So are these things taken as a credit of that party, or people consider some other issues to be more problematic?
That is a history now, and after 18 years of Tory rule in the 1980s and 90s, when Tony Blair came with a progressive agenda, and during that time, Muslim Council of Britain came, and our economists, our advisors, worked with the chancellor at that time, who was Gordon Brown, and he became prime minister later on. And also, there was a positive vibe in some areas of social life as well. So Islamic finance was one, which Gordon Brown, when he was chancellor, and Eddie George, when he was the Bank of England governor, they facilitated, changed some rules, and accommodated Islamic finance. So that was one. And also, at that time, we had been advising the Labour government, or before the Tory government, about the social regeneration, spending money on impoverished areas, and that benefited Muslims. And school teachers' salary was increased. There are quite a few social reform that was done during the early period of Labour government, especially before the adventure of invading Afghanistan and Iraq. And Tony Blair delivered that. He promised that he delivered that. And unfortunately, invasion of Iraq, as well as 7/7, which was more or less, people think that they are interlinked in terms of people's anger and others. Things became very difficult. And I personally thought that Gordon Brown, when he became prime minister, was much better as prime minister in terms of his personal relationship and with us. But even Muslim Council of Britain had to face unfortunate situation in his government because some of the ministers did not like us. But we patched up towards the end in the early 2010.
So do you think that the as compared to the domestic issues, foreign policy issues became more determinant of Muslim withering away from the Labour Party?
That was from the, especially the Iraq invasion, because that was disliked by most Britain 7, and Blair was more or less played politics, and he virtually told lie in the parliament that within 45 minutes there could be bombing. So all sorts of things happened during and before and after that. So that was the beginning, and then 7/7, I think 7/7, that's the domestic issue, and many people think, and I wrote that in my memoir, that this 7/7 did not suddenly came. It was because of the anger, and nobody justifies this, but the anger made some people violent and fanatic. So, and some people did this on their own. Muslim communities suffered for that, and that 7/7 and its after more or less what is happening afterwards in terms of prevent agenda, and prevent has been disliked by overwhelming Muslim, but the government is adamant to keep it there. And what's happening only until recently, everything was about Muslims. Muslims were seen through the security prison, but now far right violence has increased. So in the prevent, far right agenda has been included. But even then, the narratives from the tabloid media and writing media is as if still Muslims are problematic in this society.
So tell me, what are the 2-3 things which Tories can do to attract Muslims, and what are the 2-3 things Labour need to do to increase Muslim participation?
I think for Tories, it's important for them to recognize that there is Islamophobia in their party. I'm not saying the party is Islamophobic, but there are individuals who have been expressing views, and they suddenly are sometimes resign and again come back. So if the recognition is there that there is an element of Islamophobia in the Tory party, then that will be wonderful. And in the recent report, some criticism was done by the government, but the response by the government was not that forthcoming. The other thing is that the prevent has to be discussed with the community. If the community doesn't like it and the government tries to bulldoze this on the government, then there's a problem. I'm not saying the Muslims are perfectly 100% right, government is perfectly wrong. There are ways of finding ways to to address the issue that there are extremism within certain sections of young Muslims, and that unfortunately was evidenced by when 700 to 800 people went to Syria in the 2014-2015. But there are Islamophobia as well. So when it comes to Islamophobia, then some right-wing media think that it is just a victim attitude. And only recently I have been reading that Daily Telegraph is happy that Muslims are thinking of leaving Labour Party, because they think that if Muslims leave, then Keir Starmer can become a prime minister. So if that is the attitude by the right-wing media, government has to step in, because government belongs to everyone. So that's one. Labour Party should also recognize that Muslims have been contributing to the Labour Party, contributing to the economy of the society and the social fabric of the society. So we don't want any favor from any government or any party. What we need is fairness in terms of dealings, various communities. So if a segment of the community or a community is thought to be prone to certain things, then especially when it comes to terrorism or extremism, then it doesn't help. And we have been always saying that in the 70s and 80s, Irish IRA terrorists, they were not called Catholic terrorists. And whenever any small issue comes by any Muslim, it suddenly becomes Muslim terrorist or suddenly becomes Islamist. These are the jargons that the media use, but media get license probably, or media feels pleasure that the government is not saying anything.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Muhammad Abdul Bari. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you. Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid and Dr. Bari. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in to our show. You can find previous episodes and more on YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.